Well, welcome everyone to this evening session. My name's Robert. I'm one of the leads here at the Developer User Group. And if it's your first time here, we meet once a month online. And sometimes we run other events on weekends, or we also help run Dev Conferences. A conference that happens once a year, which was just last week. Before we get started, we want to thank OfferZen for sponsoring the user group. And they have a quick short form that you can fill in. If you follow that link, I'll paste it in the chat just now. There's also a QR code you can fill in, scan to get to that same link. And they'll just get some data from you from that and see how you're enjoying the different user groups and what you're interested in. And you can win a swag pack, I believe, from. So big thanks to them. And a very short intro tonight. And I'm going to hand over to Barbara Faree, who's head of product at OfferZen, just coincidentally there. So she'll be talking to us about building shared taste in your product team. So over to you, Barbara.
Cool. Thank you so much for the introduction, Robert. Appreciate it. Cool. I'm just going to share screen and also just make sure that everyone can see. There we go. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So yeah, Robert introduced the topic. So today going to be chatting about just like building shared taste. It's really more about sharing like what the OfferZen team has done, like wins and fails and lessons that we've had in trying to like define what this thing called taste is, that I think everyone probably is hearing a lot and seeing a lot on LinkedIn and on Instagram, especially when people talk about like what is important when it comes to AI. So hoping to like add a bit more like real world scenarios to that, so that you can kind of see how that's played out for us and what that might look like for you and your team. And hopefully you can take something away from this. I think that's really my goal, is like kind of seeing things that we've done and seeing how that would apply to your team and what you're doing. So yeah, Robert introduced OfferZen. If you don't know what OfferZen is, I'm just going to do like a quick hi, we're OfferZen. We're a jobs marketplace. So we bring companies and candidates together that are job seeking, and we're really like obsessed with helping companies build great tech teams. And we really believe that the best tech talent is in South Africa, and we want to make sure that companies find that talent. So that's just my little elevator pitch on OfferZen. And so yeah, I think let's get into the meat and the content. So I think before we get into just like some of the lessons, I thought it might be good to define just like what we see as taste and good taste in a team. So I think we've really gone from like in a like kind of product building space, we've gone from this like mindset of like, can we build something, to can we tell if it's any good? Like, are we actually building the right thing? And this means that there are a lot of things that you now need to consider, because like, yes, you can build fast, but if you build fast in the wrong direction, then you're not actually adding value. So when people hear, or like tech teams hear the word taste, the thing that they often think about is like, oh, it's just like an aesthetic thing, like does something look good? But our team has defined like very specific things when we talk about taste and like what that means to us. And I think some of this is also like kind of influenced by like industry perspectives out there. So not just us going like, cool, this is what we think, but really like trying to take learnings from like other companies and how they're doing it. So there's like three main things. The first one is like instructing AI really well. So knowing like what a good prompt is, knowing what a good guardrail is, like when you're building AI, knowing how to like elegantly express what you want to build, and then being able to judge whether or not that build is like following base design principles. So actually like making sure that there's that human in the loop checking the thing that's being built. The second one is more around like product mindedness. Like, do you really understand your user problem deeply? And then also, do you have that feedback loop to know like whether or not you've actually solved that problem, and being really close to that. And then the third thing is judging what you're doing based on like shared team standards that you've set. And so it comes down to that question that we like ask each other in the team, which is like, how do we tell if what we've built is good And if we look at these three criteria, like that really helps us like answer that question. So I gave this to Gemini Banana and said, like, what does shared taste look like in a team? I thought this was a really cool image just of like the things that really matter. Like number one, like being able to like be curious about the technology, but also judge whether it's good. Being able to like instruct it really well, and then also creating like really great user experiences that are delightful and that solve your user problems. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. So there's like three things that I think make this like a lot more important now. Like yes, taste has maybe, it's always been a thing, but it's maybe been a thing that was like owned by someone on the team, like the project or the product manager or the designer or the senior engineer, and something that like lived in someone's head. And things went through that person to like QA or check, or the team were waiting for like a spec or a handle from the designer because they had that kind of, they owned that like domain of taste. But I think now it's really important to have that across the team. And I think there's a few reasons. So I think the first like big one is the like product designer, product manager and engineering kind of working relationship, and the fact that it's no longer this like upstream work of like problem, spec, design, build. It's very much like real-time collaboration, and I will talk about that a little bit now and give real-world examples. So the PM and the designer are no longer like gatekeeping solutions. The second thing I think is just this like having solid feedback loops, because yes, you've got speed, but if you don't have feedback loops and like iteration, that speed is really meaningless. Like you can't tell if you're really making an impact. And then lastly is the product and data relationship, which I think is an interesting topic that recently surfaced for us, where your product and your data teams are kind of being forced together in a good way, because a lot of AI features now depend on ML ops being really solid. So your data teams being able to like build models that work together with like your large language model if you're building a model in-house, but also just making sure that you can set up like knowledge bases and vector stores and things that you need to be solid for your AI features to work really well. So those two teams needing to work together in like a much closer way. So yeah, just these are the three kind of reasons why this is, I think, become a lot more important now. And this is a really cool quote from one of the like Cursor co-founders, just around like why taste is more valuable, and what it is, like how Michael Terrell defines it in terms of this like effortless translation of like exactly what you want to build, how you want it to work, and like what you want it to like look like. And I think, yeah, that really encapsulates a lot of the kind of sentiment that we share around taste. So I've said a lot now about what it is. I just thought it's also interesting just to kind of focus our like discussion on like very specific types of roles. So I think the kind of, these are kind of all the roles that I see working together in the team. You might have AI-enabled engineers, so engineers building features, but they use AI for productivity. Then you've got like your AI engineers that actually build AI features. And then you've got your data science team that would typically like do your custom models, and then also your like machine learning engineers that would actually help maintain these models and set up your like pipeline and deployment stuff for your AI features in terms of the data space. So these are kind of all the like AI roles that we see, but I think majority today I'm going to be talking about like the AI-enabled engineer and like how those engineers like work within the team of designers and product managers, and how they can like work together in a like much better way when you have shared taste. So like when you look at the zones of impacted AI, like the team part is what I'm going to be focusing on today, but there are many other areas as well that it touches. So building an AI-enabled team and building like a team with shared taste, like what is some of the journey that we've been on? So I think there was a phase one, which was moving from like 0 to 1. So there were 2 phases. I'm going to get to phase 2 now, and then just how we got there. So I think starting with 0, like we starting kind of like at ground zero. We already had a really good like culture of experimentation like baked in for this like AI enablement to work. And like rewarding curiosity is really important for us. But we also had our work cut out for us because we had to kind of downsize our teams. We have a very small team now. We need to deliver more. I'm sure a lot of people maybe share that same feeling at a lot of companies where because of AI, you're expected to do more. And to do that, we had to start actually like adapting and standardizing the way that we build. So we had to standardize and re-platform a lot of our stuff to work off of like AI native technologies like React, Tailwind, CSS, Next.js, like the tools that AI is most trained on, so that we can work faster. So there was that piece of we have our existing systems and we need to make sure that they are AI friendly so that we can move faster. And at this point, you're kind of almost optimizing for speed over impact. You just want to get set up to build faster. And so that was like kind of phase one. And then we already had this experimentation culture, and we wanted to make sure that we're not just kind of doing AI for AI's sake. We need to now like enter into phase two, where we make sure that we like bring actual like impact. So that brings me to phase two. So this is how we've kind of like set our engineering vision of having like elite taste and multiplied Zen. Haha, Zen, yes, very much pun intended. But making sure that we're creating focus for the team on working on like the most high impact things. We can wear many different hats when it comes to AI. We're not just wearing vibe coding hats, we're also wearing like really good architecture hats and like really solid design principle hats. And then the last piece, which I think brings me into like the bulk of this session, is product sense and being able to like codify how our engineers become product engineers and can make really good trade-offs based on taste. So how did we get here? In the last year, we've worked on two really big missions, one that's still in flight. So as I mentioned, like OfferZen, we're a marketplace. The core of our product is the candidates and the talent that we've got on the product and the profiles that candidates build. And for a really long time, like no one wanted to touch it. It was super legacy code. And as we started like re-platforming some of our internal tooling to give us the confidence that like, yes, we can build faster on an AI-friendly stack, we then took on a very ambitious mission of completely rebuilding and reimagining our candidate profiles. And so, yes, that was kind of where we started. So last December, we decided to take it on, and it shipped on the 10th of March. And so we shipped a product that had AI baked in, an agent that helps candidates improve their profile, like while they're busy creating it. And then before we started, we did this like pre-mortem where we said like, what could go wrong? Very little of the things went wrong, but we learned some very good lessons along the way in saying our engineering vision is to build this like shared taste. Now we're building this feature. What are the things that we're going to learn along the way on how we make this a reality? So I'm going to, without further ado, get into lesson number one. So the cost of not having shared sense, like product sense and product taste at the start of a mission. So how we got started, we made this ambitious goal. We said, cool, yes, we've got confidence. We can rebuild and re-platform this experience. And we were quite like hot out of the, like, I don't know, racing track. I don't know what the saying is. Hot off the blocks, and said like, cool, yes, we're going to start rapidly prototyping on Lovable. Like, what is this new profile experience going to be? The design team and the product team then put that together. The team are like, cool, yes, we can just like use these components, put them into Tailwind. We can start building. Our team works mostly off Cursor. Everyone had their own like context files. And at the end, when we kind of had like our first iteration, we realized like, whoa, we're not really aligned on like the UX patterns that we want to use here. And the engineers kept pulling in the product designer going like, does this look right? And so at the end, we actually spent a lot of time on QA and having to like strip things back out because we didn't have those like shared like design principles set up at the start. We spent way more time at the end of the cycle on the QA, not because of the bugs, but because of these like judgment calls that we couldn't make along the way because we didn't have like an artifact to point to go, we want these types of error messages or this type of pattern when like editing something, and like each designer kind of just, or each engineer just use the prototype to decide that for themselves. And so, yeah, I think that was like a critical, like kind of being an AI native team lesson, is that your AI generated foundations actually require quite a bit of like refinement if you don't have like shared context files, for example, or shared skills set up. Your polish phase becomes a lot longer at the end. And I think that was like a really solid lesson for us. We still ended up shipping, but we spent a lot of time on QA and refinement at the end. So that was lesson number one. Lesson number two was around building feedback loops. I would say this was a bit more of a team win, and something that we didn't have in prior iterations. And I think this also reduced the risk of us shipping this big, like audacious mission of new candidate profiles, is that we wanted to make sure that we've got this like rapid feedback loop. We can iterate fast, and we can also roll back fast if we need to. So we've got tracking baked in, we can iterate, and then we've got like real-time collaboration, so that we can make decisions in real time and not wait for like delayed Slack feedback loops where context and things get lost. So the first feedback loop that we built was live recordings. That really changed. It was a game changer for us. We decided to switch over to PostHog, which is a really cool analytics tracking tool like Mixpanel and Amplitude. So would really recommend checking that out if you haven't. They also have a very interesting UI that looks like a 90s desktop. So go and check that out. Their marketing is very catchy. So we set this up like baked in before, where we had like session replay, which is a very valuable feature. So on release day, we could actually like watch users use the product in real time. We didn't have to work off like Datadog recordings or like Slack threads or like kind of dashboards that I would almost say like anonymize what users are actually doing. And so as we saw users maybe get stuck on like small UI things, we could immediately ship a fix. So I think in that first day of shipping, we shipped almost like 10 fixes or updates in the same day, just based on what we were observing users doing. And so how did that build shared team taste is that everyone could see the same friction at the same time. And there wasn't this like weird translation layer between data behavior and like engineering having to fix it. Like we saw it and we fixed it, and the engineers could actually come up with solutions in real time. So I would say that was like the first thing, like tracking baked in, and then instant rollback. That gave us a lot more confidence to also like ship big things. It probably sounds boring, but I think that, yeah, like one of the engineers said in one of our retros, if we have to wait an hour for every deploy, then we'd play everything safe because we'd ship nothing risky because we wouldn't have instant rollback. And so I think the speed of that rollback also determines like the bravery of like what you want to ship. And if you then quickly have to revert, then you can do it. So that was also a big win. And then the last one, I think, that I want to talk about in this section on the feedback loops is just this like the PM, the designer and the engineer relationship. So we completely like remove the traditional like relay race between PM, designer, developer. So we didn't want to go on this like multi-week design effort. As I mentioned, like the designer created a prototype in Lovable. We're now using Claude Design, which I think is a lot easier in terms of like engineering handoff. But back then, that's where we were. And the designer could actually like work alongside the engineering team and sit in on like live coding sessions and be like a building partner. And why does that give shared taste to the engineers? Because while the designer is sitting with the engineer making calls, they can explain decisions to the engineer. And then next time the engineer does something, they're like, cool, yes, I remember, like this is why things were done in a very specific way. And being in that live session, I think, is so valuable, because when you're in like Slack threads going back and forth, you're like, you ask a question, you wait for the answer, someone context switch, then you're not in the same headspace anymore. So just be in the same room, whether it's like virtual or in person. Just have synchronous time, like that's very deliberate, around actually collaborating and discussing ideas between design and engineering, which I think is really important at the end of the day. So yeah, to wrap up this section, just have the right like feedback loops between the team members, but also between your product and what users are actually doing. I know not everyone sitting here is building a product that has an interface, but I think any feedback loop that you could have in real time to inform like what you're building and how users are using your product is really important. Lesson number 3, I think, yeah, like this one also interesting, and this is a short one. So just treat your internal users like they're paying you. A lot of the time we build internal tooling for our users, and we don't care that much because they're not paying. Like, cool, we build a dashboard or we build this internal feature, and we maybe don't follow up, or we don't check if the internal teams are actually using the thing. But what we found was really valuable was we used this as like a use case for engineers to get closer to users and build that or flex that muscle of having like a user research session, speaking to the user about the requirements, building out this thing in almost like a safe learning space. So I think that's the one thing. And then the other thing is just that we also started tracking our internal users on Postdog to see how internal users are actually using the product and if they're using it. And then when we build something for our external users, we also use our internal teams to like dog food that. I think that's a really cheap learning loop, because they're very close to the customer, and they can tell us and give us feedback. I did see a question come through in the chat, and I'm going to get to questions in the end, I promise. So please drop them in the chat as I go, and then I'm going to work through them. So if your internal users hate the tool that you built for them, you need to ask yourself if you would have shipped that same feature to a paying customer. And I think that's a really good like litmus test for, are you shipping a good thing to help your internal team? So for this section, like key takeaway, I think just having shared, without having shared tests up front, you're not really shipping faster. You might be deferring the QA build, or you might have weak feedback loops and like stale iteration, and not get to that point where you're actually solving the user problem. Okay, now for section 2. There are 6 lessons, by the way. I'm now on number 4. So number 4 is just creating a space for the team to actually like build confidence and share. I think especially in the AI space, there's this feeling of maybe imposter syndrome, like not knowing something, or not like always feeling like you're a little bit behind. And I think the shared taste comes from like these shared experiences of what doesn't work. It doesn't necessarily like come from a Notion doc that someone's written about like, these are the design principles that we want to follow. I think there's a lot more to it. So there's 2 things that we've started doing to create these spaces. We've always been doing them in some way or form, but I think it just became a lot more important now. So the one was, when we kick off a big mission, we do like a fun internal hackathon. So we'd create different teams, all work on the same problem, and then we'd kind of sit in the room after the hackathon and pull apart the solutions that different team members came up with, and have the discussion about what was a good pattern, what wasn't a good pattern, like what works, what doesn't, because it builds that like shared taste muscle in the team. We recently did this for our new matching experience that we're going to be building. And so different teams did many different things. And it was so cool to see how different teams came up with very different ideas that we can actually put together to build like a really solid feature. And so nobody was right. Like everyone did something real, but we could sit and like discuss those things afterwards. And so I think the team being able to point at a prototype and say like, we want to do more of that or less of that, that's a really good conversation to have. So that's the like hackathon style thing that we did for prototyping. And then the other thing that we did is we just call it like planathons, but basically like a Google design sprint style thing where we need to really dig into like a big user problem and unpack a problem that we need to solve. So we would spend a week together coming up with, or actually sitting in a room and getting close to the user problem, like unpacking the data and the matrix and the user research, and then almost prototyping together. And so at the end, we're not coming up with like a spec or solution, but we've also we've kind of co-authored like what we think this like shared problem looks like that we need to solve. And the designer can and the engineers can have this discussion about you're right, here's why, and we know that we're working towards the same thing. And so I think just to round this up, the important thing is that it's not just cool, we all know what we're doing. It's more that we're figuring it out together. And we can share what we learn, and we can create a safe space to have these discussions. Lesson number 5, I think this was what I spoke about earlier in terms of data and product working together a lot more closely. So 2 things here, bringing your data team into your prototyping phase, not the post-mortem of after you've shipped. And then when you build AI on top of your existing product, you usually need to look at the data that it's built on. And we had some interesting learnings there. So I'm going to talk about the building an AI feature on top of an existing product or data structure. We built the agent that analyzes the candidate profile and gives them suggestions on what to improve on their profile. And I think everything was obviously fine when we built the profile without the agent, but then once we added the agent, we realized that the way that that data was being stored isn't the way that AI interprets it, in terms of understanding relatedness of different things as a human would understand it. So I'm going to give an example. So an example would be a candidate imports their CV, and there are skills on their CV that might be called something different to what we have stored in our structured skills database. And a connection needs to be made between that and what the agent then puts into the profile from the CV, or a candidate puts in specific free text about things that they might want to improve on in their next job, or skills that they want to use in their next job. And the agent needs to read that skill and suggest a skill that is similar or the same to add to their profile. And so what we ended up was needing to create a vector store as the middle layer that the agent can use to take the data and relate it back to skills that we have in our skills taxonomy, that we are now completely rethinking, by the way, but that was an interesting lesson. And the second thing was just, as I mentioned, around bringing data into the room. I think specifically your data analytics team, we realized just that while we're building the feature, they're there, they can understand what the underlying data looks like, and they can already start building in the feedback loops and the dashboards that you need to track that feature. Or if you're working with a data science model, the data scientist can understand what the feature is and what model needs to be built to enable that feature, and not the other way around. So yeah, those were some interesting data lessons. And so I think, it's just that your data that's fit for your users isn't necessarily fit for the model. So you need to kind of work both ways. Your data team needs to develop product sense, and then your product team also needs to develop data literacy. And that is also a form of shared taste in the team. And then lastly, I think, this is an interesting one. And I think this has come up at a lot of the in-person kind of tech leader events that we've had, is that product sense isn't just for the PM. You almost want mini PMs in your team. You want your engineers to speak to users, to help, to be part of measuring the impact, and then also to be problem first. So for smaller features, we want the engineers to act as mini PMs, come up with the solution, talk to the user, or talk to the designer, and run ideas past them. So you don't need the designer to make the judgment call every step of the way. And the PM can't, or the designer can't be the bottleneck for everything. So what we want of like every role in the team now is like talking to users, being interested in measuring the impact, not just like, did we ship it, but did we move the metric? And what are we doing next? And asking those like proactive questions, and also being like problem first, solution second. So really understanding the problem deeply. So what we did recently is we like created a fictional character of like all the problems that they're facing on our platform. And then like a second story of like, if we solved it, what would that user's experience look like? And that was the basis for the engineers going and thinking about like how they would solve that problem, instead of getting like a spec and going like, oh, this is how we're going to solve it. Yeah, so the kind of, these are some of the like, yeah, these are the 6 takeaways. Shared principles upfront to make sure that you don't have that like long QA bill at the end, having your tracking baked in, so really solid like feedback loops, treating your internal users like they pay you, having like shared taste with shared experiences, and making sure that you've got a really good relationship with your data team, and then also making your engineers like become mini PMs so that you work towards this goal of creating like mini kind of product engineers, and not just software engineers. So yeah, just to end off, I think like AI is definitely lower the bar for us for solving problems, but I think it's raised the bar for solving the right problems and then also like learning from them. It's not just like building anymore, but it's knowing like what is worth shipping and how do you learn from what you've shipped. And I think that's the kind of essence for me on like the taste, and the team being able to like share that. So like a group of humans being able to look at a thing together and go, more of this, less of that, ship this, kill this. And I think, yeah, if you don't do that, AI will help you ship faster, but it will be mediocre. And that's not what we want. We want to ship high about things that actually make a difference. Cool. That is the story. We're going to go into Q&A, and then to make sure that you stick around, we also have a QR code that you can scan and fill in to get some OfferZen swag, because what would an OfferZen talk be without swag at the end? I'm just going to open a chat and see what question we had earlier. Also, please feel free to unmute and ask your question. I think that is preferred. But let me look at the question in the chat quickly while everyone else thinks of the questions that they want to ask. How often do designers and developers work together? For how long does it tend to be? And how useful have you found it to be? I'm a QA working with developers. I know they like to also spend time alone. So I'm curious about how those sessions would work. I think that it depends on like back end and front end. But I would say that for like our front end engineers, the designer would spend at least like time with them every time that they're working on like a big thing. So I think it depends. If it's a small feature, it would be more of a, can you check this thing for me? But if it's a big thing and we're working towards like shipping it, then the designer would probably like sit with that engineer, or I don't know, like we don't have a QA team, like the designer and the like product manager roles, like they do the QA in the team along with the engineers. So we kind of see that as like a built-in thing, is like the designer and the engineer sitting together doing the QA and then like fixing the issues on the fly. So I think they would probably spend the most time together before we are shipping and while we're doing and going through the QA phase. I hope that answers your question. Cool. Another one. Have you guys played with AI taking roles? Can you can you explain that question? Cool.
So one of the things we've been playing around with is we set up agents and we give them roles. So every time you kick a build, you'd have a specific agent that's your design agent or pattern design agent. And then it inspects your patterns that you've committed or an AI has committed. and suggests adjustments or flags it for a human to read it.
We haven't done that specifically. I think we've got that for some of the other like pieces of the development process, but not design. What our designer has done though recently is set up like a very AI-friendly design system that we can use through Claude Code that the team can consume. But I think then, yeah, that QA step, I think sounds like a really good use case to do what you've just explained. So yeah, that's really cool. We haven't done that. But the roles thing, I think taking roles in terms of like thinking through problems from a product perspective, that we have done. And I found that really useful.
That's very cool. I'd be interested to see how many other people use AIs to enhance a position and a position's feedback for instant results or almost instant results.
What do you mean by position?
So like a QA does certain tasks. You set an agent to perform those tasks whenever a build is performed. And how many firms are actually doing that at the moment would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are like a lot of companies are doing this. I think on like a recent Laney podcast, they had a product from LinkedIn mentioned not necessarily like that as part of the build process, but more as part of like other roles in the company, like branding and marketing and like product, and almost like testing out specific things and making sure that those things can be like QA'd with specific like internal agents that I found really interesting. So yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. How do you mention lovable Claude Code? Yeah, the team are, I think, between Claude Code and Cursor. From a design perspective, we've moved over to Claude Design almost exclusively now in this last cycle. I think they are still struggling with the limits on Claude Code, on Claude Design. And so there's this open design project that basically, I think some of the Claude design like source code got leaked. So there's an open source, open design like app that you can actually run locally that does the same, but just uses your Claude, like the normal Claude tokens instead of your Claude design tokens. And that also worked really well because you can then export your prototype and import it into Claude Design when you're ready to like ship it off to Claude Code. So yeah, we're still between. Cool. But yeah, sorry, something else that I actually like a hack that I found really useful with Lovable and Claude Design is Lovable has plan mode and Claude Design doesn't have that yet. I mean, I'm sure you could tell it to do that, but I found it useful to use Lovable in plan mode and then copy that plan over into Claude Design. The result was a lot better. So just a hack that worked really well. Any other questions? Anyone wants to like unmute and ask? I think it would be interesting, yeah, to maybe also if there's anyone that wants to share just like if any of the things that I mentioned, like they've seen like surfaced in their team or like really resonates with some of the like challenges that they're facing or current things that they're thinking about. Yeah, you can like share it or like DM me on LinkedIn. I think it'd be really cool to like keep the conversation going. Cool. I'm gonna share the QR code now for the swag because I'm assuming that is what everyone is waiting for. Give me 1 second. Cool. I see a hand up. Go for it.
I see there's another question in the chat.
Oh, it's fine. You can go for it.
Oh no, I was just pointing out the question.
Oh, I think sorry, I might have missed it. Oh no, I did answer this one about any other agentic coding assistants you've tried. Have you settled on Claude Code? V0 is another one that we've tried before. That's the only other one. Sorry, that's the question I didn't answer. I found that Lovable and Claude Design, sorry, I think it has a bit better like design sense. Where I think V0 is a bit better for just like wireframing, I think UX and specific flows, and not necessarily like prototyping the like visual elements that you would want. If that helps. So I think it depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, no, that helped me.
Cool.
Thanks. Just
Okay.
wondering if, because I did see another question come through, not mine. Just wondering if that, but might not have.
I don't know. I don't see.
It says you mentioned you did a pre-mortem before kickoff.
Oh, I don't see that. Why am I not seeing that? Can someone read it to me? I'm not seeing that show up.
Cool. You mentioned you did a pre-mortem before kicking off. What were some of the scariest things that came out of that, and how did you go about preventing it from happening?
Okay, cool. Wow, yeah, now I need to go. I did actually look at that, Rachel, just in preparation. So I think the scariest thing was we wanted to build this agent that gives candidates recommendations on how to improve their experience. It was actually one of the features that got requested the most from candidates. Candidates also requested a better like CV upload experience so that they don't have to go through the effort of filling in all of the information. And it ended up not being as scary, and we got good feedback from the agent. So I think there were two things that we put in place for that. Also see Jason Tamers in the participant. Shout out to Jay because he worked on the agent with me. So that was really cool. Cool to see you here. Hello. Yeah, so there were two things. I think one, just like having a really like solid agent prompt in place and like really battle testing that. Picking an LLM that was really good at like following instructions. We ended up going with one of the Flash models. It was really good at just following the instructions, but also like giving really good suggestions in terms of wording and the way that we wanted it to work. So I think we just didn't want to build like AI what do you call it, AI slop in terms of the agent experience. And then we also put in place like a feedback loop in the product for candidates to be able to give feedback on the suggestions that they're getting from the agent. Is it good? Is it bad? Why is it bad? And then like go through those feedback kind of cycles to see what candidate is saying, and then like adjust the prompt of the agent as we go. So that was the one big thing. And then the other big thing was just around like the deployment day. Yeah, I think being able to like, yes, roll back if we need to and make that less scary. And then, one more thing maybe worth mentioning is, it just slipped my mind. I think it was the tracking thing. And that's why we then like decided to go with Postdog, is like not being blind to what we're shipping, like being able to actually have some kind of like quick feedback loop in terms of the session replay to see what users are doing. So those are some of the like the big things that we were scared of in being like quite ambitious in what we wanted to build. Cool. I see one more question in the chat. In UX, the base interface is often the one you don't see. How does Google balance making AI features highly visible versus making them seamless and invisible within the user workflow? Saturday, do you want to explain the question a little bit to me? I'm not quite sure. Cool. Or anyone that wants to play interpreter for this question in the chat. I'm not quite sure how to answer it.
I think my reading of it is how do when you're adding AI features like the ones you've added to OfferZen,
Mhm.
how do you balance making them very visible as like here's this very cool AI thing
Okay.
versus
Yes.
having like maybe just the like CV upload and then it's AI in the background
Yes.
gives this nice
Got
experience.
it. Yeah. Yeah, I think the CV upload thing, like, yes, we want that to be, I think, like less visible, because like what matters is not the agent. What matters is the fact that the user can upload it and the result is really good in terms of the experience. On the other one, on like the agent one, I think that one and making it highly visible, that is actually something that we're currently reevaluating, because we haven't seen the adoption numbers that we were hoping to. We've gotten some good feedback. But I think that the way in which you position that feature to the user matters a lot. And so we've had to work a lot on the positioning of, we're not just going to give you like a list of things and create more effort. Like, what is the benefit in you actually using this feature, and like, what can you expect? I think from a like more UX point of view, like using patterns, like AI patterns that users are used to seeing in using other AI tools like chatbots and stuff. I think that was the other thing that was important to consider. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. I see what you mean with the first one. Yeah, I think that is something, that first thesis, something that we are yet to get to. But yes, we are definitely on the second one, like wanting users to notice it and try it and see the value. And we're actively currently working on looking at the pattern that we can tweak to get more users to use it. Cool. That's an
Okay.
interesting question and one to think about. Thanks.
If there's no more questions, we'd like to thank Barbara for joining us and chatting to us about the experiences with Taste. And thanks everyone for the claps. It's is really appreciated. If you'd like to present some interesting stuff to Dave UG, there are channels to do so. You can email us, send us a message, and we will review it and let you know. And thank you very much.
Thank you so
also,
much.
thank you to OfferZen.
Yay, get your swag. Thanks so much. Bye.